if anyone is still having a consistent menstrual cycle right now, that there'll be periods in the month where you feel so motivated. You're like, oh my God, I'm like a complete badass right now. I am saying yes to all the things. I am on stage speaking. I'm recording podcasts. You know, I'm doing everything that just makes me feel like Wonder Woman right now, and I'm unstoppable. You're having a beautiful surge in your key hormones, including testosterone.
This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are. Welcome to this episode, everybody. I'm here with Adele Johnston today. She is the menopause coach and educator, and Adele's going to be sharing with us all the things we need to know and understand about hormones. Let's face it, they are crazy things that can send us into a spin. So Adele's going to shine some light, clear up some confusion, and give us some really great information on this today. A massive welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I love talking women's health and empowerment. So here for it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. So you are the absolute go-to when it comes to this topic. And I know we've had many conversations about this and hormones and what goes on at all different stages, let's face it. What I really love to delve into today is how, like you say, we can empower particularly women. We are, as business owners, we're juggling lots of things. It's not easy at the best of times, let alone when hormones come into play. And we can't often see that coming either. It's not like it's an obvious thing. So yeah, I'd love to explore that a little bit. Starting off with, what impact can our hormones have on our performance, on our output, and in that way?
Well, this is a really good question, actually. I think when we look at it for hormones and performance or living our life, and they really do play a massive role when we think about, we say this word hormones, but we're talking about multiple different endocrine system, like releasing of these hormones, everything from parts of the brain right down the body. I call it the chakra line because that's ultimately the way that the endocrine system, if you look at it, works through the body. So if anybody here does a bit of their kind of spiritual connection work, you'll get what I mean by chakra line. But yeah, parts of it, 3 elements of the endocrine system that produce hormones sit within the brain. And we move down, we'll be familiar with things like the thyroid, the parathyroid, got the adrenal glands, the ovaries, etc. So when we share about what hormones do in the body, I am, of course, the menopause coach. So it gives it away as to the area of life and stage of life for women that I heavily focus my reading, my time, my research around. But I do have twin 14-year-old daughters. So we're kind of at that point where it's a pre-menopause for them, and for me, menopause and everything in between. It might help if I give a little slight backstory as to why, because for those of you that are either watching this on video, I get this a lot, you're far too young to be in menopause. I actually noticed changes in my own body from multiple different ways, psychologically, physical, when I was 33. And at 35, at that point, I kind of started to suspect that it was a hormone-related challenge or issue that I was experiencing. And it wasn't until I was 37 before all of the private and our NHS doctors agreed with me. So it took a long time to go through that process. I'm 41 now, and I actually went into early menopause, or as we refer to it, POI, premature ovarian insufficiency, when 35, but officially on my medical records at 37. The point that I make with these, giving you the kind of age categories, is because a lot of doctors and individuals in this world will kind of look at menopause as something that happens when we're old. Yeah. It's like, it happens when we're older. It's not something I need to worry about in my 20s, 30s, or 40s. But the reality is that most women will experience changes in their hormones in their mid to late 30s. Yeah. And we're starting to see more and more come out into observational and research studies. I will go as far as to say that I don't actually believe I was in early menopause at that time. I think my theory behind it is that it's actually quite normal that women experience these changes. It's just being a nutritionist, being a positive psychology coach, and someone that is very much in love with who I am in my body. I recognized changes very early on. So giving a little backstory on that, I think helps, because if anyone is listening to this thinking, yeah, I'm experiencing a lot of changes and I can't put my finger on it, you are not too young to be in perimenopause. And some of the youngest women that I've had the privilege of meeting in my network were only in their early teenage years when they went through menopause. So bearing in mind, this is not an age-related thing, really. It's a part of our life that can come at any time and any stage. So how does this impact, hormone-wise, impact on us and our performance? Well, let's start at the kind of perimenopause stage. Yeah. And when you're in your perimenopause stage, this is the part that we enter into at the very beginning of that menopausal journey. And that can last for a decade or more. Yeah. 2 years for some women, 10 plus years for others. And it's the point where your sex hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are starting to take a decline. All right, for some that can be quite rapid. For others, you might not even really notice much of a change. Why this is important to know is because your hormones play a massive role in how you sleep, how you feel in yourself, how motivated you are, how your appetite hormones regulate. Yeah, we've got two of those. We've got leptin and we've got ghrelin, and they are in charge of, am I hungry? Am I full? We've got insulin, and we hear a lot about insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity when we are in menopause years. And the whole reason for that is because as your estrogen levels start to drop, these hormones can be compromised. They might not be as efficient. We might not actually have things like gastric emptying, which is where the food is digested and metabolized in a quick process. We might find that we're not efficient with that anymore. So our gut health becomes impacted. And the reason, again, that I explain this part to you is because this can affect everything from your confidence, how you show up, yeah, how you're sleeping, your sex life and relationships, yeah, how you're managing your business. And we all know, if anyone is still having a consistent menstrual cycle right now, that there'll be periods in the month where you feel so motivated. You're like, oh my God, I'm like a complete badass right now. I am saying yes to all the things. I am on stage speaking. I'm recording podcasts. You know, I'm doing everything that just makes me feel like Wonder Woman right now, and I'm unstoppable. There's a reason for that. Okay. You're having a beautiful surge in your key hormones, including testosterone. So we welcome that. We're like, yes, testosterone is that beautiful motivation hormone. But equally, you'll have other times in the month where you're kind of like wintering. You're like, I just want a cocoon in my oversized hoodie. I want to put on a really cozy pair of socks. I want a hot water bottle. I want to put my hood up so that I'm blocking out the world. And we almost go inside, we go insular. And that kind of wintering is because, again, we're having a reduction in key hormones. Yeah. And we're kind of retracting away. We don't want to be seen in our business. We don't want to do the social media stuff. We don't want to talk on stage. So working with your cycle is really important so that you understand, I can say yes to that stage thing. I can say yes to that podcast this week of the month. I'm going to perform at my best. Yeah. But I'm going to say, I'm not available that week because I know I'm going to be so self-limiting in my beliefs. My confidence is going to be on the floor. I probably won't have washed my hair in a week, and I'm not wearing any makeup, and I'm in joggers, and I am nobody's friend that week. This is the reality of hormones, and there is nothing wrong with you.
And is it best to embrace that and ride those tides? Or is it something, I mean, they say, oh, you can't control your hormones, but like, I guess what I'm saying is, should we be doing anything to manipulate that or override that or go, well, I need to be on go mode, so I need to do something to stop myself from wanting to go into wintering? Or is it better to go, no, just go with that flow, for want of a better phrase?
Yeah. Okay. So what's coming up for me in this question is that we're going to have women on here who will so identify with that in the whole, no, I need to control. I need to be able to control. And to some degree, we all have that in us, right? Where it's like, oh my God, I've got this amazing opportunity and I have to be in go mode for that. Yes, there are things you can do. Now, what I would say that the kind of two prong to this is we don't want to manipulate ourselves, and we can't manipulate to a degree. Yeah, there's no such thing as kind of balancing of hormones. The body doesn't even do that itself. We've got surges, we've got peaks and troughs within hormones at certain periods of the month. Entering into perimenopause, it's not as straightforward as that because the surges and the drops are so sporadic and like quite intense for a lot of women that you may have it planned to go do a talk, and actually you are having a perimenopausal, what we refer to as hormone cliff dive. And you wake up the next morning and think, I can't even get out of bed today. I don't know what's happened. I feel very low in my mood. My body aches. Everything is just switching off, and I'm not leaving this bed, and I'm cancelling everything in my diary today. You cannot override that from a place of love and compassion. If that's what your body is saying to you, it's really difficult to just say mind over matter because it's not. So I want to answer this with of course, you could absolutely force yourself out of bed. You could, and there's people do this, you could absolutely take a hell of a lot of stimulants and caffeine to get you through, caffeine being one of them, to get you through that day. You might have supplements or medications that you're able and prescribed and able to use. And you might have that whole looking in the mirror saying, just get on with it mentality. And sometimes we all have to do that. There's nothing that I'm going to call out here that's calling out shame or guilt or anything of that matter. The reality of it is that sometimes we are not in control. The body will do what the body does, especially in menopause. So there are some tools and there are some practices that we can look at, but it's about, I would say here, not so much manipulating where we are, but more about what is your threshold of acceptance for that.
Yeah, okay, I like that. There's not a right or wrong, it's what, and how it works for the individual. I really find that really interesting and relatable when you said about the cycles then turning into quite sporadic and less predictable. I think it's one thing when you do know those cycles, you can tune into them and you can plan, but when you're going, whoa, wait, what just happened? Are there any key indicators for us to know that that's what's going on prior to, for instance, going and having blood works done and finding out for sure, like just in terms of signals or signs that we can personally read to almost be able to go, this is highly likely to be a hormonal cliff dive, or Because
Yeah.
let's face it, things can trigger us. We're busy. It could be something to do with running the family and children. It could be something in work or business that comes up and creates stressors. And I've, understand, I don't know much about this, but I'm sure you do, that stress can impact hormones as well and switch them
Mhm.
on and off and so on.
Yeah.
So if we're experiencing things, but we're like, well, what is it? Is it stress? Is
Mm.
it my hormones? Is it like how? Yeah. What are the
Mhm.
clues?
Yeah. And it's a difficult one, right? I wish that there was an
Mm,
easy way of saying, yeah, just do this finger prick test or this
yeah.
saliva test and it's going to tell you whether it's stress or menopause. It's
Yeah.
just unfortunately not that simple. However, there are some really nice gold standard checklists or trackers that we can use. So one of them, the Climactic scale, is, so we call it for short the GCS. And
Mm,
that is something that I have available completely free. You don't need to purchase this. Okay. So
okay.
if anybody wants to get a copy of this for themselves, it's just a tick box
Mm,
exercise, not as in what
yeah.
we call a tick box. It's more a checklist of, are you experiencing any of the following symptoms
Hmm.
and to what degree? Sorry,
Yeah.
we'll do that bit again. Are you experiencing any of these symptoms and to what degree? And it's got a kind of numbering system that we can then look at. Is there a high possibility that this is menopausal hormone related?
Hmm.
And through that, it starts to give us a bit more insight.
Mm,
So, yes, we can start to look at symptom based, and actually, the criteria and diagnostic for perimenopause and into menopause is not actually blood testing. Yeah,
okay.
it is symptom tracking, and it's looking at what symptoms are you experiencing, the severity of, and the frequency. So
Okay.
this is where things like tracking your cycle is really helpful, knowing
Hmm.
what is and is not your normal. Yeah. And
Mm,
when we say that, it could be that your normal is a 30-day cycle. You start to then go to 36 days or beyond. You
mm,
maybe have 4 to 6 weeks of continuous bleeding without stopping. All of these things are
mm,
deemed changes.
hmm.
Okay. So the main challenge that I see in the majority of women that I support is that there's this disassociation with self.
Yeah.
And it's that physiological and psychological connection that we just see is kind of disjointed. Yeah.
Mm,
And we can find that a lot more, especially in our career and business led women, where it's a show up, do the things, and we almost put ourselves last.
mm,
So we teach a lot of our ladies on how to recognize the communication of the body. Because
right.
believe it or not, our body communicates with us thousands upon thousands of times in a day. It
Yeah.
tells us, I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with this. I like
Yeah.
this, I don't like this. Yeah. And it's recognizing how we feel, what we're thinking, what we're experiencing, and actually understanding as well that there's this whole misconception that we need to feel 100% every day,
Mm,
and we won't. Stress is a big impact. It's an endocrine disruptor, it's an inflammatory
yeah.
response. So
Mm,
when we bring stress into the body, which sometimes we do, and
mm,
sometimes it's part of life, there's many layers to stress. And this is something where we look at the physical impacts of stress and the emotional turmoil that it can bring.
mm.
But I've been learning a lot recently as well about grief, having gone through the loss of my dad just a couple of months ago. I was learning that the heart itself, so powerful,
Yeah.
has about 40,000 neurons contained in it, inside of it. And it's like neurons are only found in the brain, right? It's like
What?
it's got a little
Yeah.
mini brain in there and the gut. So we've got these
Yeah.
three brains in our body, that we've got our brain in our head, the brain in our gut, arguably the brain in our heart.
Mm,
And through the impacts of things like grief,
yeah.
the heart is a muscle. It can actually change shape because of the deep trauma response that we are going through in grief. And that's not good for us if that
No.
happens. So, you know, the whole saying of they died of a broken heart.
Mm.
It's a true thing. It's a real thing.
Mm.
It's not just sadness and then potentially leading to other things as an impact of that.
Mm.
Dying of a broken heart is a real thing because it actually changes the shape of the heart.
Mm.
So some of the things that we can do for that is making sure that we're bringing a bit more of joy,
Yeah.
connection, you know, these things that just bring more of that purpose-led life to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So important.
Mhm.
I've talked with people and heard lots about this sort of heart healing, and it can
Mhm.
sound a bit mystical to people if
Yeah.
you're quite analytical, but it makes sense, at a
Yeah, we're
cellular
all
level.
connected, right? We are one big cell. When we think
Mm.
about the way that the body works, we're not a brain, a heart, you know, we're not organs, we're not bones. We're
Mm.
one big walking connection. And when
Mm.
we've got that nervous system, if you ever look at how the body, I mean, it's phenomenal when we
Yeah.
learn about how everything works together.
Mm.
Everything communicates. Yeah, the brain is in communication with each part. There's the arguable thing happening right now inside the women's health and the menopause space to say, well, menopause doesn't actually start in the ovaries. Menopause starts in the brain because the brain is controlling elements of that endocrine and hormone release that
Mhm.
eventually the brain is going to signal to the ovaries, we're releasing our last lot of eggs. Yeah, and we're entering into that non-fertile stage of life, which is quote unquote natural and normal
Mm.
part of
Mm.
aging for us as women, born female at birth with female reproductive organs.
Mm.
But I think there's that part in all of this where there's nuances to it, right? There's chemical, medical, surgical induced menopause for women who are going through cancer treatment, maybe having hysterectomies for medical requirements. So we've got to consider that for some women, they'll enter into their hormonal decline very gradually.
Mm.
Doesn't make it any easier. And other women who will enter into the hospital doors pre-menopausal, yeah, haven't even
Mm.
experienced any of the changes in their hormones yet, and leave the hospital post-menopausal. They skip
Yeah.
the entire perimenopause and menopause stage when they have a hysterectomy where the womb and the ovaries are removed. So remembering that there's all of these differences and everybody's journey is
Yeah.
different, it does make it more difficult for us to just come
Yeah.
here and say, right, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Here's the journey you're going to take, and this is what you need to do.
If only it was that simple.
Yeah.
What impact does that have, just out of interest? So for somebody who perhaps does have surgery and it's
Mm.
done in a day, what impact does that have on the brain or on the mind, or even,
Mm. Yeah.
because I would imagine you would come out and do you see the world differently? Do you feel differently? Like, I don't know. It
Yeah.
must be
So I
quite.
can't speak from experience because I've never had a hysterectomy, or if we sometimes we'll see what's called a partial hysterectomy, where the ovaries will be left and
Mm.
the uterus or the womb is removed.
Mm.
The whole concept of that is that the ovaries will then still effectively be producing those key sex hormones, including estrogen, testosterone.
Right.
The challenge that we have with it is that without the womb, the ovaries and the brain and all the body connecting will start to then be like, oh, actually, yeah, we can't form a pregnancy here. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't require all these sex hormones now. And eventually we look at it kind of within about a year or so, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit shorter for some. Eventually the ovaries will then stop working efficiently and effectively. So
Mm.
there's that argument of it's it's still classed as that kind of rapid onset of menopause. Now, what
Yeah.
happens is a lot of these women that I speak with and that I help, so I'm just sharing this through their
Yeah.
recollection of what's happened, is that they'll wake up from surgery. And of course, you're coming round from a major surgery. This is not
Mm.
a small little kind of keyhole thing. This is major surgery. you're then recovering from the anesthetic, recovering from the medications and the pain relief. You're then recovering, and your body and your brain are getting used to the fact that there was this organ or organs, if both of them, the uterus and the ovaries, are then removed, that was producing estrogen and testosterone, to just name a couple. Yeah, there's other parts of the body, like your adrenal glands, that will produce forms of estrogen, and we call them lipids, but fat cells will produce forms of estrogen. It, however, does not produce the queen bee form of estrogen that we need to feel like we're thriving, which is called estradiol. So estradiol is made in the ovaries, and when the ovaries stop working or the ovaries are removed, we don't have that hormone. Okay, that hormone is so protective for bones, muscle, heart. Yeah, the whole, if you think about head to toe of symptoms of menopause, a lot of these women are then leaving the hospital and starting to experience the onset of flushing, sweating, eyesight changes, sore jaw, burning mouth, tinnitus, hair falling out or thinning. Yes, when you're washing your hair, you've got big clumps that are kind of like coming out, and you think, Jesus, what is going on here? You might then find that you've got things like frozen shoulder, and you think, oh, I've just damaged myself at the gym, but it never gets better. Yeah, it's like that constant ache. We have a lot of ladies say things like, I just feel like I've got sore bones. We've got heart palpitations, sore breasts, IBS all of a sudden when we've never had that type of bloating or flatulence or cramping in the tummy before. Itching in the skin. It's like vaginal changes. So we can go from being quite active in our sex life to then having no libido, no want or desire for sex. Yeah, completely just disassociating from that. Dryness, bleeding during or after sex, even wiping after going to the bathroom can feel like you're using sandpaper. These are all signs and symptoms that you're in a hormonal decline. So again, the way that we can kind of look at differentiating that, and you brought this in around stress, is that stress will impact the body through a lot of the same symptoms. Yeah. However, what we can start to then see is if we're having vaginal related challenges like that, it is way more likely that it's perimenopause or menopause.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And with decline of so with stress, I've also experienced it can create sudden change. So, like, for instance, a traumatic event bringing our cycle on early, or a traumatic event stopping a cycle completely, or just those kinds of things. Is there any reason for that? And can it go either way? That's the thing. Can it go either way? Can it go to...
Absolutely. So taking ourselves back into, and I want to make a disclaimer here as well. Okay, I'm not an endocrinologist. All right, I'm not a medical doctor of hormones, but I am very knowledgeable because this is what I do and what I read and what I love learning about. It's kind of like when people say to me, Adele, what do you do for downtime? And I'm like, I read research papers. And I'm like laughed at. So many people are like, read like some fiction. And I'm like, why? I want to learn.
I'm the same.
So I love sitting down, a little glass of wine, deep in a research paper. It's just my jam. Or listening to podcasts. I've been listening to one really excitingly just now about GLP-1 and the impacts on hormones and things. So that's anyway, digress there, diverse conversation. But when we bring it back into stress, so what happens within the body with this? If we think of a stress response in a female, I'm going to talk about female bodies with female reproductive organs, okay? This is everything from a head to toe reaction and response. And if we think about the body as being this one interconnected cellular network of proteins, we are one big walking protein. From the brain down into the sexual organs, the body is there through And the kind of purpose of us having those reproductive organs is reproduction, baby making. Not everyone will want to have children. Not everyone can have children. And I just want to highlight that we acknowledge that and gives love if this conversation is a bit triggering for some. With that being said, it's the number one thing that the body will naturally stop and shut down to preserve what hormones are required to function. So when we think about the body is wired for survival, the brain's job, its primary job, and it's never evolved over the millions of years that it's been a brain, its primary job is to keep us alive. So risk assessing, danger management, all of those things. And when we think about the fight, flight, freeze responses that the body can go into, known as the polyvagal, if we think of that red, amber, green, when we are sat in the red zone, which is that complete shutdown, we are frozen with fear, worry, anxiety, depression, stress. The number one thing that the brain is then going to say is, we need to preserve our energy for survival. We are not ready to make another human being. Okay, so that is where, and this is in its simplest of forms, the signal is we are not reproducing, do not release that corpus luteum as an egg into the body for fertilization, because we cannot sustain growing an embryo right now. Okay, we are in danger, we are not reproducing. So it's pretty funky and cool the way that the body and the brain work. But what that means for us is we are then going into what is known as amenorrhea. So we're not having a period. We're not bleeding because we're not releasing that egg. Or if we are, the body is so much in haywire that it is continuously having a bleed cycle. Yeah? And that stress response is more likely to stop our bleed. It's more likely to lead us into, well, there's two sides of this, right? For some, appetite completely switches off. Again, that kind of innate response of survival is that we are going to preserve this energy. We're going to send the blood flow to the legs because you might need to run. Yeah, we're going to make sure that the digestive system isn't getting a lot of that energy because we want to preserve what's there. We don't want to digest quickly the food that's in the tummy. We want to keep that. So clever the way it works. We want to make sure that we are pumping more volume of blood around the body so the heart rate quickens. But it's taking that energy away from the reproductive organs. It's taking that energy away from digesting the food in a processed form that it normally would. Yeah. So we're trying to preserve to survive.
Yeah.
And for some, that might mean that you have no appetite. So you're not eating, you're not sleeping, because again, the brain is like high alert, can't go to sleep, we're in risk zone, we might need to run any moment. Yeah, the brain is not adapted into modern life in that it still will believe that there are saber-toothed tigers and things that are going to run us down any minute. So stay alert. Yeah. So that's one form. The other side on the flip of that will be many of us can then have heightened response to food and hunger for comfort. And we turn to those foods that are very comforting to eat, normally in kind of carbohydrate form, simple carbohydrates, sugars. Yeah. And the volume of food can be higher. So weight gain can occur. More sedentary in our movement, not sleeping great. Yeah. So again, you'll either be in one of those two camps.
Yeah.
When we're at heightened stress. And I think maybe just to bring this into kind of a summarized form as well, is we have a thing known as chronic stress response. And when we're in chronic stress, we don't know we're there. And that's the hardest part of self-identifying.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
This is probably why quite often when something passes or is released, or you come out of the other side of something,
Yeah.
you then go, I didn't realize how stressed I was
Yeah.
about that, or I
Yeah.
didn't realize how much that was, that a toll that was taking, because you can't feel it when you're in it.
No.
And I'm talking that and that could be like quite long term staying there. On the
Yeah.
flip side, there can be obviously one-off. There's an event that happened in my life that was just one-off, really sudden, out of nowhere, terrifying, and that my body had a very different response to that than I've noticed it has had in the past to other, just, I'd say, more level stress, but that's probably very high stress compared to the
Yeah.
norm.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we don't know. That's yeah, we don't know we're in it.
Yeah, you won't recognize you're in it. You'll maybe think certain things to look out for. So sleep impacts. If you're not sleeping super well, you're maybe having kind of what we would deem like night terrors or vivid dreams. There's this overwhelming like fear based in your body. It's like, I've just got this feeling of fear and worry and anxiety. Speak to your doctors, and the first thing that they might say is, okay, do you want to try some antidepressants? And maybe they don't work and they're not helping where you are. You might notice a change in your appetite and your weight, whether you are in the camp of my appetite has completely switched off and I'm not eating. Yeah. And you've got that whole, like, I just feel physically nauseous if I go to eat anything, versus I can't stop eating. I'm hungry all the time and I just want comfort. Isolation. So again, things like saying yes to events, but cancelling last minute, or I'm not available. So that kind of isolation can start to happen. There's many things. I mean, your skin is your biggest organ. So it will normally show.
Yeah.
Yeah, we forget it's an organ. It's an organ on the outside of the body. Your skin will show stress. And unfortunately, you might not be able to notice it in yourself, but those that love you will see it. Okay, so it's things like dullness to the skin, the vibrancy and the sparkle in the eyes are gone. You might notice things like even telltale signs of ulcers, mouth ulcers, or canker sores, if we've got American or Canadian friends here. Dry lips. Yeah, these are all signs that the body is in a response mode. If you're familiar with the phrase oxidative stress, this is like environmental stressors on the body. Yeah. And then when we think about oxidative stress, we've got antioxidants. So thinking about, can you bring more antioxidant foods and practices into your day-to-day to help with that? Inflammation reduction is your key number one priority.
Yeah.
Because we know that where we have inflammation in the body, the harsh reality is that if you let that go on and you leave that, it does result in disease. That's, a really hard to swallow pill, is that if we don't do enough, and I don't want that to sound shameful when we say that, to support ourselves, we're opening up the floodgates to disease in the body.
It's that awareness, isn't it? It's going, well, okay, well, there's a good chance that I have some of that going on, therefore I'm going to do
Yeah.
some things about it, and even small steps. I think there can be a danger with, for somebody like myself, I would go, okay, I probably put myself in high stress situations just by, having high achieving goals and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But an awareness level of what's good for me means that I take care of things like exercise, nutrition, sleep, and these things. So I probably have that balance in the, okay, yeah, I might push myself here, but I take care of myself here.
Yes.
But the danger that I think somebody like me could be at risk of is almost masking
Oh, yeah.
the problems that could be going on deeper, because well, I'm sleeping okay and I eat healthily, and and so it's almost like that could mask some of the deeper damage that could be happening due
at a
to
cellular level.
due to the level I hold myself to, which is often too too harsh on myself.
Yeah. But
So
I think you're right. And the majority of people listening to this right now, well, I'm hoping will resonate with this, right?
mm,
And it's not about sitting here saying you should or shouldn't do this or that. It's actually more about be aware
yeah,
of how you're feeling. What's your body showing you on your
yeah,
skin or telling you in your
yeah.
gut? Are your
Mm-hmm.
bowel movements healthy? When was the last time you had a poo? When was the last time?
Or
Yeah.
is it all day long?
Right, exactly. Or when was the last time your urine was really clear? And are you
mm,
noticing that when you go for a wee, you're like, actually, it's really dark and smelly?
mm,
Allowing your friends or your family members to be involved in your care so that they
yeah,
can highlight to you things like, are you going to stop working? Are you going to
yeah,
take downtime? And it's listening to that, right? So I think it's
yeah,
like you say, it's this whole thing of masking is a thing that most women will do.
yeah.
Holding yourself an account for, have I done that today?
Mm-hmm.
How do I feel? There's a really easy way of this. So I'm going to give you this practice, and this
Yeah,
is maybe one that you can bring in to your practice.
yeah.
I tend to do this personally when I get in the shower in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
but do it any time that feels good for you. And it's body scan. Okay,
Yeah,
it's not going to be something that most people will be familiar with this. You can do a body scan as quickly or as slowly as you want.
yeah,
But the whole process of this is about giving yourself moments of connection. And
yeah,
we simply just bring our focus. And if you're someone who needs to place a hand, you can do that. So when you're in the shower, you can either place a hand on the top of your head,
yeah.
or if, like me, you're trying to keep your hair dry because you're not washing it that day, then just bring your attention to the top of your head
Yeah.
and ask yourself the question, how do I feel here today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And are you noticing that you've got a bit fogginess? Are you clear?
Yeah.
Are you in sharp mind? Or do you feel like your brain's swollen? It's like feels
Mm,
like it's just too big for my skull today.
yeah.
Pressure. So you work your way down. Yeah. And it's like
Yeah.
in my forehead, in my eyes. How am I feeling in my jaw and in my mouth? And just working your way down, neck, shoulders, breasts, heart space, belly space, legs, right down to our feet. Are we recognizing any tension, any soreness, any worries?
Mm,
Yeah. And actually, yeah, okay, no, I feel really good today. Or, I've got a little bit of backache. And it's being aware that that's an indication that our body is communicating a bit of inflammatory response.
mm.
So what
It,
can we do for ourselves in that moment, right? That's when we reach into our toolbox and say,
yeah.
I need to make sure that today is a minimum. I have some antioxidants in my diet, and that can
Yeah.
be things like herbs, spices, dark berries like blueberries,
Yeah.
blackberries. These are amazing for that.
Yeah.
Blueberries every day in my porridge. I love it.
Same in my shake.
Yeah, amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's also things like I'm going to make sure I'm hydrated because my skin feels a bit itchy.
Mm,
And I'm going to take a fresh air walk.
yeah. They're the best.
Mm,
It's such a simple practice, but I bet most of us don't do that. And
yeah.
we ignore those niggles, don't we? We ignore those little
Yeah.
things that creep up. But
Mhm.
I notice that it's usually in the evening if I switch off, and
Mm.
or even like when I lie in bed. You mentioned earlier about tinnitus, and
Tinnitus, yeah, in your
I
ear.
noticed
Yeah.
there, and it's not all the time. Maybe it's I don't notice it all the time, or maybe that it isn't like that all the time. But I've definitely noticed it at times of heightened stress. I don't doubt that it's connected. It's horrible because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, it's just this noise.
Yeah. For some, it's
So,
like my granny used to say, it's like a chirping bird in my ear.
oh, I
And
wouldn't mind that. It's for me, it's like just like ringing.
yeah, I get the ringing. It's like I explain it almost like when you were in the younger youthful years and you would go out clubbing and
Yes.
you'd stand too close to the speaker, and then
Yeah.
when you got home
Yeah.
after all of the and you were in a quiet room, you'd be like, oh, my ears are ringing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's reasons for this, right?
Mm.
Hormonally, there's impacts on the decline of those hormones. Estrogen is so protective for the tissue around the ears and the eardrum,
Okay.
remembering that we've got a bone in there, and as
Yeah.
we, in the ear canals, and as we start to enter into these responses, our
Mm.
bones are also impacted through the loss of estrogen, estradiol
Mm.
in particular. Um, the harsh reality for us as women is that 1 in 2 women will develop osteoporosis in their postmenopausal years.
Wow.
1 in 2, which is really high. And if we
Yeah.
think about that, not to be like a downer in this space, but that can bring with it risks of just fragility fractures, wrists,
Yeah.
hips are a big one. And we know that for a lot of women that have a hip break or fracture, it can actually compromise their mobility forevermore. They may need a walking aid or they may need a wheelchair. Um, and some of them, the harsh reality is that sometimes within 12 months of a very bad hip break, it's fatal. So we don't want to muck about with this, right? This is our health. And
Yeah.
the argument here is that actually for a lot of women, we spend half of our life post-menopausal.
Mm.
We used to say it was a third of our life,
Mm.
but actually, we're living a bit longer. We're seeing a lot of women can enter into menopause a bit earlier. So
Mm.
for some, it can be half of our life is spent
Yeah.
with these low to no hormones in our body.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a large portion. And also it's a time in our lives when we usually have got a bit more clarity and stability in our life. We
Yeah,
usually, you're
yeah.
settled. If you have a family, you may have,
Mhm.
you're not at the early stages where you're figuring it all out. So
No, that's right.
it's almost like there's always something.
Yeah, I
Always
know, I
something to
know.
navigate.
But it does get to be this beautiful, powerful opportunity of time, right? There's
Yeah.
this almost reinvention that can happen.
Yeah.
We have a bit of a laugh and a joke with a lot of our ladies because they'll be like, I'm just don't have the patience for other people's BS anymore. And I'm like, good, because
Yeah.
actually there's a reason for that. Estradiol, as it lowers in the body, is known as a compassion hormone along with progesterone. And actually, as those two hormones start to disappear over time through menopause, we do have this, like, we do have a lesser tolerance for other people's BS. And
Mm-hmm.
we start to become a bit more clear around, I am not appeasing this situation anymore. I'm putting me first.
Mm.
So it's such an opportunity
Mm.
and a really positive opportunity at that. But underpinning all of that, we want to make sure we get your health foundations for
Yeah.
menopause stabilized, because my background when I worked in corporate for like over 2 decades was in operational resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about what that means in business, when you're a solopreneur and it is you that is running your business, it is you that is driving the sales, you maybe have team that are supporting with the operations.
Mm.
If you are not in your business, would your business survive?
Mm.
And for many entrepreneurs and women in business, the sad reality is no. If you're
Mm.
not working, you're not earning. And I had this beautiful experience of invoking my continuity in business this year
Mm.
when I was a bit unwell in
Mm-hmm.
May and I had the whole of May off. Unfortunately, it's been like this chain of events. I
Mm-hmm.
then lost my granny in
Yeah.
the June.
Yeah.
And then my dad was diagnosed with a stage 4 brain tumor and cancer in the July and passed in the August. So we had this period of me not being in the business from surgery in May
Mm-hmm.
right through until September of this year, with
Mm.
the odd bits here or there that had to be done. That's that
Yeah.
whole thing of pulling ourselves out of bed in the morning when we're like, I just have to show up for this one thing today and
Yeah.
then I can get back on the sofa.
Yeah.
And beautifully, the business has still thrived.
Mm-hmm.
What it has done, however, is highlighted that I'm still very much needed. I'm not at the point where it's not, you're not ever needed.
Mm-hmm.
But we can celebrate the fact that the contingency works when we know
Yeah.
what we need for business. And I hope that this does, for those of you listening to this that are in business, I hope this does trigger you to think a little bit about, if you weren't in your business, would it still survive? If you weren't actively selling in your business right now, would you still be making money?
Mm.
Because that's the reality of what this is. And the
Yeah.
reason it's relevant to menopause is because you may have a period of your journey where you are far too unwell to show up in your
Mm.
business.
Mm.
And there's a lot we can do to support with that.
Yeah. That's really, really valid and important to think about and plan ahead and just consider in terms of what you're creating. And there'll be people for whom it's okay because their business is not their survival, that they don't need to earn every single month. It's more of a nice to have, and it's an extra, and it's a thing that they enjoy,
Yeah.
not something that is vital to the contribution to the home. But I know women in those situations, and it is more of a passion than a necessity. But again, many cases that are complete opposite, and they're the sole or main breadwinner, and we need to be prepared always for
Yeah.
all eventualities. This is
Yeah.
such a great conversation. There's so much more that I could ask you and go into. I feel like we've covered so much today. I know there's the topic, and there will be people thinking about, what about HRT? And I know that
Yeah.
gets positive and negative, reviews. There are people
Yeah.
that don't want to mess with things, and people that say it's the best thing they can do. And I think you tell me. I think your answer will probably be, it depends on the individual, and it's a completely unique thing. But without too much on that one, is there anything, like, sort of briefly, that you would want to share to anyone that's curious about HRT?
Yeah, so HRT, or hormone replacement therapy, also at the moment kind of been rebranded as menopause hormone therapy, or MHT. So both of those things are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I would say at this point is I have HRT. So
Mm-hmm.
I have the Mirena coil as my progesterone, also acts as my contraception, because we don't know, unless I remove that, if I'm postmenopausal yet. I don't know. I don't bleed on it, so we don't know. I have testosterone that I apply to my outer thigh every day as a
Mm-hmm.
gel. And I also have the estrogen gel that I apply to my inner thigh every day. So no
Mm-hmm.
injectables, nothing nasty. It's just very simple, very easy.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I didn't
super
know that
easy, right?
existed.
And
Yeah.
yeah, they don't have a fragrance to them. The only thing I would say is that if you've got freshly shaven legs and you apply your estrogen gel to that, because it's alcohol based, it's a bit of a stingy, like, oh, like Home Alone moment, but not on the chin. On the chin, it's on the legs, and you're like wafting the fresh air to try and cool them down. But yeah, so for me, I made the informed, educated decision to start that when I was 37, based on the fact that I have higher risk of things like osteoporosis in the family, of heart disease, and my mum's mum passed from a form of dementia called Lewy bodies. So, from that aspect of it,
Yeah.
I opted for the protection for that.
Yeah.
Not just for that reason, but also because I was losing my marriage. I had completely lost myself,
Mm.
and I was so severely unwell with my menopause symptoms that I couldn't function. I couldn't be a mum
Mm.
to my daughters, and I couldn't be a loving person to myself. So,
Mm.
that for me completely and still completely changes my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I work with many women who choose not to replace through pharmaceutical hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at the core foundations of their health through other
Mm-hmm.
forms. So, again, yes, it's very individualized, unique
Mm-hmm.
to your wants and needs.
Mm-hmm.
But I have HRT.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly, I haven't looked into it
Mm-hmm.
much, and probably will, but I always want to learn and know and understand these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not one to just take any kind of hype that, or hearsay.
Yeah.
I think you need facts, and you need facts that are right for
Yeah.
you with anything. And so knowing, okay, well, for some people it might be a lifestyle shift that actually has the biggest impact, and that's all they need. But in other cases, it might be a case of, well, no amount of that is going to give you the balance that, or not, not the balance, but the quantities or the ratios of hormonal level that you need right now, and this is a solution that is an option. I think everyone remaining open-minded to what's going to be best aligned for the individual is
do your reading, ask the questions. And this is something where I'll say time and time again on my podcast about how it is our responsibility to care for our bodies. It is not our doctor's responsibility. You will always know your body better than any medical professional or professor ever can. So trust yourself that your body is always telling you how it feels, and you will innately know then what you need. So trust yourself and understanding what you want and what you need. Okay, it's your responsibility. With the most love, don't sit ignorant within this space. Understand what is available to you. What does it do for your body? And if you're not someone like me who loves a pastime of reading research papers, then ask questions to the person who's done the reading.
Amazing. Great, obviously, advice, but also raising awareness, Adele. Like, I really appreciate that. I think this conversation really helps to bring awareness to our individual bodies, our needs, listening to ourselves, learning how to read ourselves and not just ignore, mask up and soldier on, which I know so many women in business particularly, but people do.
And that will only get you so far for so long.
It will catch up with you eventually. Oh, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I'm sure there'll be many more, but I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright, because you were born to be brilliant.